Good afternoon, everybody. How are we all? Let's just put the chats on. Okie doke. Hi, Bonnie. Right, let me just check that you can all hear me and see me okay. That would be a good starting point, won't it? Let's have a see. Oh, great, Bonnie. Thank you. You can hear. That's brilliant. Right, let me go up to the top of the comments. Okay, Bonnie, you have your stuff out with you today. Are you going to craft along live as well? Because I think, was it Beverly? I'm sure Beverly crafted along with me on Tuesday, and when I checked the Facebook group once I'd finished, and I saw Beverly's card on, I thought, oh, she's beat me to it before I put it into the group. But it was great. That actually really made my day to see that she crafted along with me and was able to actually sort of reproduce what I was making. So, yeah, that was great. So it'd be perfect if you can do that today as well, Bonnie. Does that mean I've inspired you to use it? Because was it you, Bonnie, saying that you hadn't actually used this set yet? That you'd had it in your stash and it was one of those ones you hadn't actually had a play with. And who else we got? We got Susan. Hi, Susan. And Kathy, Jean, Sue from Wet Hampshire. Oh, do you know what? It's wet over here as well today, to be fair with you. It's not cold. It's just wet. It just makes it miserable, doesn't it? Especially when you're sort of in and out with a dog and you can't. And the dog always gets really soggy. As small as she is, she's a little sponge. Yeah, it just makes hard work of everything, doesn't it? So, hi Hazel. Hi Helen. How are you? Hi Trisha and Valerie. Hello, Mum. Mum's here too. And who else? Kathy. Perfect. Oh, Karen here. Karen, is that from Germany? Is that right? Andrea. Crafting Knit Sew as well. Oh, you haven't used it yet, Bonnie. You're going to see which one you prefer. Well, you've got this one here. You've got the one I made on Tuesday, and I found the video on YouTube of one that I made, I think it was about a year ago. I had to search through my cards, and I have a feeling I must have sent it out to someone because I actually haven't got the card here, but I found the YouTube video, so you'll have that one to view as well. Oh, Karen from Germany, perfect. And we've got Tracy as well with us, and Patricia and Lorraine. A few more joiners, that's great. Right, so as I said at the beginning of the year, actually, when I do my double lives for the week, I've decided that I'll probably use the same collection on both days. For one, it builds up the library of videos on YouTube that you can refer back to of our particular collections, which I think is always a really useful thing. So, I mean, these are my ideas. Hopefully these will then prompt you to come up with other ideas. So I think that's a really good thing. And yeah, because I always come up with different ideas and I never quite know which one to use. So if I do the two in the week for you, then sort of gets the ideas out of my head as well. So this one I've used today, I haven't actually done any embossing on this, and I've made a completely flat card. Now, I like to make completely flat cards, mainly because when I send them from Ireland, the cost of them is ridiculous if I send anything with too much dimension on them. But there was once a time when you used to lay everything flat and you used to think that, you know, it needed a little bit of something, and, you know, it didn't always, you wasn't always happy with creating such a flat card. But I think with Lisa's system and the stencils that she gives, we can create so much dimension in the shading of the images that we use now that I really don't think a flat card is anything to be ashamed of. I think it's a really nice sort of skill to be able to have. My thumb, yes, you noticed a little friend with us today. Well, The story behind that was after I left you on Tuesday. Tuesdays and Thursdays are my busy days. I do my lives with you, but then I need to get my youngest son up to Cork. So it's about a 40-50 minute drive up there. He's got an after school club. He climbs, you know, the climbing walls, sort of bouldering and sort of lead climbing with ropes and whatever. He's a real life living Spider-Man, honestly. You see him clamber up the walls. Yeah, so what I have to do on a Tuesday, as soon as I finish with you, I need to then go and make dinner quickly, put it in our little thermal pots, and then we get in the car and go up. So Tuesday I was making dinner, chatting with Stephen. He was sitting across from me, and yeah, I chopped my thumb when I was chopping the peppers, and it's really quite a nasty one, unfortunately. So I had to bandage it up. Now this looks better. I had to go out and buy some more bandages because this looked better than what I've had for the past couple of days. So it looks a little bit more respectable on screen. Yeah, but it's amazing how much of a hindrance that is. Even everything sticks to it. Yeah, and using foam pads and things, yeah, I realised just how much that's a bit of a hindrance. So it shouldn't get in the way of me making this today. Okay, so that's where I am with this card today. So that's yeah, so that's what I want to do. I'll create another sort of a flat card for you, but I don't think it lacks anything else. We've got some die cutting going on in there. I'll give you a different way to use the layering folders. You could actually emboss this. You could emboss part of this if you wanted to. I just sort of chose not to this time. So before I move on, I just want to give you a quick reminder that sort of while stocks last, Lisa's pick of the week on the website is there until Sunday evening, say until stocks last. You've got the opportunity to purchase the storage bag there on its own, sort of empty. So if you wanted more to store your inks away, or your blending brushes or makeup or whatever it is you want to put in there, then that's available for you until Sunday. So if I take that off, and I'm just going to pop on the sets that I've used there. So what was that, Lou? Google banned me, suspended your account. Oh no. Well, hopefully you can get that sorted out, because Lisa's coming up on a live tomorrow evening, and that's certainly one you really don't want to miss. So make sure everybody, actually I'll say it to you now, Lisa's live tomorrow, remember, 6:30. It's 30 minutes earlier than we're used to having it, but it's not one that you want to miss. Yeah, that's the message that I've received from Horton Towers today, so I shall just remind you a little bit later on as well. So today's live, I'm using majority of the time the layering stencils. The embossing folder is there. You can emboss this, and I will sort of jump in and let you know where this can be embossed when I get to that stage. The other sets I've used today, there's not much today actually, to be fair, is the nested stitch torn squares for your mats and layers. Now I've chosen to use those. I like the decal edge, but you can use any of your nesting squares, or actually any of your nesting shapes, to be honest, because I think this will most definitely work on rectangles, circles, and of course the squares. Now the other set that I've used, something that you may well have in your stash also. It's not available on the website at the moment, but I'm pretty sure many of you will have this, are the essential edges, the edge cuts. Now this isn't essential. Now this is to cut this shape here. Now there are other ways to do this, of course, if you don't have these dies, but yeah, I've chosen to use them today. So I'm really not using much, really not using many products today. I say the majority of the card, the actual design of the floral vine is going to do the work for you. So I'm only using 4 colours as well that you can see sitting up there. So those 4 colours are Woodland Moss, Inclement Weather for a little bit of shading, Pina Colada and Antique Pink. Now that's what I've chosen to use. Obviously any combination of colours, particularly the flowers, will work. I've chosen to pick out another ink pad that isn't used all that often, just for a little bit of shading, just to show you a different way how to use it. Because again, as I said on Tuesday, if you buy the sets of inks, whether it be a set of 10 or set of 12, depending on the release, you may have inks in there that you're not perhaps entirely sure what to do with. So hopefully I can sort of prompt that along for you. So I'm going to take that banner off now. Okie doke. Hi Sue, you're new to this site, are you? Oh, brilliant. So are you new to the lives as well, Sue? Do you have any of Lisa's products already, or are you a complete newbie to us? That'd be quite interesting to know. You've not seen the edges, Grandma? It is an older set, yes. Oh yeah, absolutely, you can use that. Let's say you don't necessarily need to use a die. There is, you can actually use a ruler. When I come to show you this actually in a second, there are different ways you can create this. So as you see, I'm using a square card today. So I'm using a square card blank. Let's just show you the layers. Okay. Let's just move that out of the way. Don't need that for a second. Okay, so I have a square card blank. And I've cut a piece of cardstock to fit the front of that card blank. So I don't need to give you measurements actually. So this will work on whichever card blank size you are using. So I cut myself a piece of green cardstock that covers the front of the card completely. Then I've used the nested squares. So I'll just bring out those nested squares. I've used the largest of the nested squares to cut out the aperture there. Okay. Now, usually when we do this, we then discard either one of these pieces. We can either use that as a frame or we use this as a matten layer. But I decided to use this, all of this today, because I wanted the front of the card to be covered, but I didn't want it to be completely plain. So I'm turning this over now. So by using this mat and layer together, both of these, it will just give that base card a little bit of something. It just zhuzhes it up a little bit. So what I've done, I've turned this over. Now to make this easier to line the front of the card, I'm going to use washi tape. You can use whatever adhesive you like, some form of tape. And I'm just going to attach those two pieces together so that they stay connected. Because you could, if you wanted to, if you wanted to use 3D foam as 3D, but as I say, my aim today was to create a completely flat card. So instead of embossing this piece and creating some sort of pattern in the background, I've actually used the die and used that as an insert to create that little bit of interest on your card blank. So we've got mismatching washi tape on the back. That doesn't matter again. So what I'm going to do, add my glue and just line the front of the card. Now, my little friend here really doesn't make things easy. So I might be a little bit cat-handed on some of these today. So there we are. We've just lined and just coated the front of that card blank, and it just gives us a little bit something different, doesn't it? Sometimes we can get so focused in using our dies in a particular way that we sort of sometimes just need to be prompted to do something different. So if I bring up that original, you can see here that there's one matten layer with the white here, but then there's this false one underneath, which again just makes it really flat. What I've then done, I've cut 2 layers with the next size down in the nesting squares, and I've cut, here they are, I cut 2 layers, and I cut these both at the same time. So I'm using textured cardstock, just adds a little bit of something, but you can use plain cardstock or smooth cardstock, it's entirely up to you. So I've used this size square, the next size down, so it mats really nicely in layers in the frame that we've created there. So I've cut that out of 2 different colours now, the white and the green, so the green can be any colour you choose. And I cut them out at exactly the same time. So I've laid these 2 pieces together and die cut them with that one die. That works perfectly. And I did cut a second piece of white cardstock. We'll come back to that in a bit. Now the next thing I've done with the EDGECUTZ dies, this is where I've split the nested squares that I've cut, and I'll show you the dies here. Now we've got a set of 6 dies, all of these different shapes, and these are different because they are very much now when I say linear die, obviously this isn't a line, it's scalloped, but it has 2 ends to it, as opposed to being sort of an encompassed shape to cut out. So for this shape here, I've used these really quite smooth sort of rolling hills shapes to cut out the die. So if I just place, that's not the one. Let me see if I figure this out. There we are. There we are. So you can see I've used this die to cut out that shape here. And basically it just cuts from one side to the other and cuts the piece in half. So for these pieces, I've used this cloud shape. Now you can use these to create clouds in the skies or whatever, but this could also be rolling hills. And my usual go-to would be this sort of shape. So I've taken myself out of my comfort zone to try something different with this shape here. So you pretty much just sort of place this where you think looks best. You can have it go straight across if you want, so it's straight. Now what you do need to do when you cut this is make sure that both of these nested squares are lined up exactly together, because that will be important in creating this card. So you will have this sort of scenario going into your die cutting machine. So you have your green layer underneath, or whichever colour you're using. So you have it completely stacked. This die, whichever you choose, will cut nicely and easily straight through the 2 layers to cut that in half. Now what you could do if you don't have these, and I appreciate there will be some of you that won't have that, it is so easy to take a ruler or a pair of scissors. Actually, you could take a pair of scissors and just sort of freehand cut through the 2 pieces together. That is important though. You could do that, or you could take a ruler and you can just slice straight across. A straight line would be absolutely perfect as well. That would work so well. You could cut at a diagonal. So the key thing would be is that you must cut between the 2 layers at the same time, because the idea behind that is you're going to take the white for the top, and then you're going to take the green from the bottom, and that is going to be your layer. Now you do of course have this second layer going on too, so you can make a completely reversed card, or because it's a square you could turn it round. You could use that like that, or you can like that. Anyway, the possibilities are endless. The idea is that you are keeping the integrity of this square die cut from the nested squares that you've got there. So what I'm going to do now is turn this over, And I'm going to match those up. And again, I'm going to secure these two together. And so we have this nested. I need to find some tape now. There we are. So we have this intact square, which is what we are going to stencil onto. So make sure this matches up perfectly. And just secure that in place. Now, because this is going to be on the reverse, it really doesn't matter what you're using to secure that with. Okay. But you do want to have that quite secure, because when we put this on our Ultimate and stencil it onto it, we don't want any movement there. Now, it does help that I don't have any nails either to use the washi tape. There we are. So I'm going to put one across there as well. So I know that that is all secure, and we have our nested square that will fit perfectly in there again, and you'd know none of the difference. Okay. So now we are ready to get stenciling. Now we've created our layer. Now do remember, of course, I'm using the floral vine for this, but this technique will work with any of the collections that you have. So if you don't have the floral vine and you want to try it, you can use that. Or if you like the technique and you want to build up a set of cards using this technique, then obviously use other dies as well, or other stencil collections. So I shall bring in the floral vines and my stencils. Now we're going to be stenciling twice again, like I did on Tuesday with this. So it does mean that we need to go through a lining up process. Now I've done this different ways before when I've done other stenciling. But for this one in particular, although I'm not embossing on this, I want to use the embossing folder because that gives me an idea of all the detail, but it gives me an idea of the size of the design and how to place this on my layer. Now to do that, obviously, we then need to marry that up with the peg system and sort of we position this on our Ultimate. So I'm going to lay the embossing folder over the first of the stencils, and it's quite easy to marry up the design. And what that will do, it give you a good idea of how this design can be placed. Now, because we have, we can see through both the embossing folder and the stencil material, we can then position our square underneath and just get an idea of where we want to begin stenciling. So I'm going to position my design slightly at an angle to get the best use of the design onto the cardstock there. Now, holding all these three layers together, you can see that my circles to fit on my pegboard are free. So that's ideal. We can hook the pegs on there, layer down all the stencils. We don't need the embossing folder now. I'm using the tacky mat. Now, the tacky mat is absolutely perfect for this technique, as would be the magnetic mat that I used on Tuesday. So the magnetic mat you can use, then use the magnets to keep this secure. Now, the tacky mat is doing that job for me today. So although my cardstock is at an angle under my stencil, that's no bother because I know that this won't move and I've got the best position for my design. So now I can start stenciling. So let's take my lids off. So I'm back to using Woodland moss because what I'm going to do, obviously we're stenciling onto the green and to the white. We're using it as a complete image, but all the areas that I'll be stenciling through onto the green, I'm going to keep all that very tonal with the Woodland moss. So that's why I've used that colour. So if you were going to swap the green for a different colour, then choose an ink that is tonal and would layer on top of that to keep this sort of look going on here. but I am going to continue and use the Woodland moss up onto the white section also. So for all of this foliage, I am just treating it as if both of these layers were the same colour. What you do need to remember, because we have this section here, we don't want to create an ink line that goes past this section here. So what you can do, you can get yourself a little piece of copy paper or some of the masking tape and just create a little barrier. I'm going to use a piece of a sticky note here. I don't want to cover up the apertures in the stencil, obviously, but I don't want to create a line. I did here, and I've disguised it really well, which is then what's prompted me to make sure I don't have the same mistake there again. So I'm going to put down the initial layer with the Woodland moss. Now I do want this to be quite dark because obviously we're going tonal on the green layer here. Now it may not look, or you may not think that it's going to show too much, but honestly, you know, it really does. And if you are using a different shade of colour, just test it out. Just test out which colours layer really well on top of the cardstock you're using before you get stenciling. So before I move this, I'm just going to add a little bit of shading to these leaves here. Because I'm only using the one green and we've got 3 or 4 different layers of foliage, you want to create some sort of difference between them. So this is where I'm going to use the Inclement Weather. It is a grey colour. So disperse the ink first on your stencil material, on the plastic or the mylar, before moving it into the apertures. And again, the same way as I normally do, I'm only sort of tipping into the first half of the leaves, because then the majority of the leaves will stay green, but they will just have just a small area that is going to be grey and or therefore in shadow. So I'm just going to do a little bit on the foliage that's up in the white as well, just to keep it uniform. So then I'm going to take that away. Now be careful, because obviously the tacky mat is going to hold your stencils down as well, even though the stencils are on the peg. And you can see actually just how well that even the Woodland moss lays on top of that lovely green spring colour. So we have another foliage layer, and again I shall do the same layer with my Woodland moss. I use the brush to lay down the majority of it, and then what I tend to like to do is come in with a brush and just add perhaps a little bit more intensity with the brush, and just build up that colour a little bit more. And that's actually quite a good tip, especially when you're covering larger areas. It's not so much on this stencil because this is an A6 stencil, so everything is sort of, I like to call it dinky. So everything's a lot smaller. But when you're using some of the larger areas and you've got the larger blooms, you have a large open sort of aperture like that. It's really good idea to use those larger blending brushes just to cover a lot of area quite quick. So again, I'm just going to come in with a little bit of the Inclement Weather just to tip into there to give a little bit of a shadow. And this is what I mean, that I don't worry about making completely flat cards or non-dimensional cards, because I can get a lot of shading with my inks and my brushes, which gives you the illusion that there is sort of dimension there. Now, obviously, if you were to emboss this as well, you would have that dimension without adding too much bulk to post. But say I'm keeping this one particularly flat, but it's not to say that you can't emboss this as well. I mean, that's the idea, isn't it? We've got so many choices and everybody sees things in a different way. Now you can see how much dimension we're actually creating and shadow we're creating with the, just with that shade in there. So if I bring that in a little bit, there you go. There we are. We'll leave that there. So now we have stencil 3. We are still on the foliage. Now we add in this, the detail on the leaves. And again, I've said before, I like to keep this tonal also. I really like the effect that it gives. So I'm going to come in quite heavy as I can with my blending brush to start with. And what I like to do with this, I just like to just have a quick look, see what that has done for me, to see how heavy that is. And then I will come back in with a smaller stencil brush and keep it all tonal. So I'm still using the Woodland Moss, and come in with some extra ink on the areas where I think it needs it the most. And then I just keep checking and adding the ink until I like what I see, basically. I like to keep it tonal. You could use a completely different colour. You could use the inclement weather on top of this and add a contrast. You know, it really depends on the mood and what it is that you're creating. So I'm going to take that off, and we've got that sort of that detail in there, which is really sort of subtle, but it's definitely there. So stencil number 4 is the last of the foliage. So this adds the stems. So again, I'm going to use the Woodland Moss. I'm perhaps not going to go as dark as I have done for the rest of the layers, purely because these are stems and sort of a different dimension to the image. So I'm going to take that away. And you can see I've kept that a lot lighter. So that's a lot more effective. So it looks like I've used lots of different colours as opposed to just the 2. Now we come on to stencil 5. Now this is where we need to sort of be aware of where we're stenciling. So now we start adding in the blooms. Now what I'm going to do, the blooms that are on the green area, I'm going to carry on stenciling in green. You could do it in a different colour. That's, you know, that'll be for you to experiment and try with. That's, you know, it's up to you. But or depending on the colour that you've chosen. I did think about using a creamy colour as well. I did think about using this colour, in which case I would have stenciled using like almond, what was the colour? Almond frosting, to stay tonal on the cream as well. But I went with the green in the end. Yeah, so it's, and I think if, I want to come out this way. And I think if you were to use a paler colour, if I were to go with the cream there, I could possibly still use colour on the flowers. But on the green, I want to use the Woodland Moss. Now, obviously, these are flowers, so I'm not going to go too mad on them with the green. So I'm going to just add a little bit of colour there. I will create some shading by bringing in a stencil brush and just adding a little of extra colour at the base of the flowers. Just like that. I don't need to go too mad. And then I can start bringing in the colour to these flowers at the top. So I'm going to use the pink on here. So this is the antique pink. I'm going to add a lot more colour at the base of the flower, as I always do. There's a tiny little bit here as well. Don't forget these tiny little areas. You may think, oh, that isn't really going to make a difference, but it does. It's those little bits of detail that bring the whole card together. So take that away. You can start seeing now how this is sort of developing. So now we have this colour. Now I'm going to do that rose, that bud in the pink, because I like it, that colour. So I'm going to do the buds there in the pink. I'm going to then bring in the Pina Colada and do these other blooms here. Now, because this is the first layer of these flowers, I'm not going majorly bold because obviously we need to layer detail on top of these. But we have just a small amount of this bud on the green, so I'm going to split the colour and the stencil colour of this bud in two. So the top half that's on white I've stenciled in pink, and the bottom half of that bud I'm stenciling in green, just to keep in keeping with the rest of the theme. You can see that just there. So stencil number 7, we have the designs coming into the flowers. So what have I got here? I've got the green in my hand, so I shall stencil the green detail onto this layer here first, and also this one here. Before I swap and add the detail to these top flowers in the pink. And I'm going to do this flower in yellow. So you can see how that's coming along. And actually this would make, if you were to keep just a one layer of green and not go through all this die cutting, that tonal stenciling with the green, I think looks really, really nice on there. I've not done that before, but that would work as a layer to lots of different things, I think. So we have stencil number 8, which is just the centre of the flowers. Now Tuesday I went really bold and done that in black, but I'm just going to keep that subtle and just go with pink in there today. So that's the first of our sections done. Now if you wanted to, you could just leave that like so. I think that looks really pretty as it is. But I do want to fill in this little area here. So what I need to do now is bring in my embossing folder again, purely because it's got the detail in and it gives me a chance to line up these stencils. So bring my the first stencil in also, line up so the designs marry with each other, and then I can use that just to start positioning where I want to stencil the second layer of the design, just to fill that space. So I think I want to do it like that this time. So I'm going to keep hold of the layer and the stencil, don't need the folder now. Now this time you'll see that it's not really feasible for me to be lining this up on the pegs. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold this in place. I'm going to use the bottom of the stencil to line up against my ultimate here, so I know I've already got, you know, a good reference point. And I'm going to choose one of these lines that the stencil can line up along the side. So I'm going to choose this dotted line here, a line along the bottom, so I know I'm keeping it straight, and I'm just going to lay that down. Now again, my stencil layer, my matte layer here that I'm stenciling onto is at an angle, but the tacky mat is keeping that in place. I know that I need to line up this stencil directly along the bottom and also along this dotted line here. So you can choose whichever reference point that you want. The key to this is remembering though where you've lined that up. Now I know that that's sort of quite distinctive. I've got that in mind, but what you can do if you are going to be slightly more unsure, or if you sort of focusing more on the centre of the ultimate, you can just mark that. So you can either mark this side, or you can just put a little bit of washi tape just there. You know that in line with that line there is where I need to reline my stencils. Now I appreciate that if you are new to this, that you may say, well, the stencil isn't held in place on the pegs. That's fine, because I'm using the tacky mat. And you saw that when I was removing the stencils previously that the tacky mat is holding the stencil material as well as it's holding your layer there. So now I'm just going to do exactly the same stenciling, the same technique as I did before to stencil this part. So I'm going to try and whiz through this a little bit quicker for you this time round. And I shall use all exactly the same colours, the same, you know, as much as I can remember to do. You have this image here as reference, so, but don't worry if you go a little bit heavy-handed or if you're a little bit lighter. It really doesn't matter too much at all. So now I know that this layer is staying in place. I've got that confidence, and I'm going to peel away my tacky mat, and you can see here where the stencil is actually adhered to the tacky mat, so you know that it isn't going anywhere. So you just peel that off gently. I can line up my next stencil with this line here on my dotted line there. Make sure that it's flush along the bottom, and just lay that down, and that's in exactly the right place. So again, I can come in and stencil and be confident that everything has lined up where I want it to be. So I should come in and do that stenciling there. Now what you want to try and do actually when you try and fill in this space here, having already stenciled one area before, try not to have your designs overlap. It's not the end of the world if it does, and if it does overlap, you'll see through the apertures, and in which case you can perhaps just avoid it a little bit, or just go a little bit lighter, because you don't want to really sort of hinder the look of what it is that you're stenciling. So you can see it's easy for me to swap these stencils in and out and say this is really only able to do because of the tacky mat. Now there are ways of doing this. I mean, I would have found a way of doing this without the tacky mat for sure, and it would have been a system of using washi tape and magnets to hold it all down, but obviously the tacky mat just makes this 100 times easier to do. And you can see that those details are lining up perfectly, and I'm able to whiz through this really quick and have the confidence that I'm still stenciling and creating something just as beautiful as I did when I was using the stencils on the pegs. So it really does open up your ability to create even more. And you can see that I'm filling in this space really nicely. Oh. So now I come on to my stencil where I'm adding the flowers. So now obviously I need to bear in mind that I'm only stenciling green on the green cardstock, and then I'm only adding different colour onto the white cardstock. So I'm going to, I mean, you can use the same colours as you did this time round, or you could change the colours around a little bit. I could have stenciled this flower, which is pink here, I could have stenciled it yellow this time if I really wanted to. Again, that just gives you a lot more options. So I'm going to bring in this one, and you can see I'm getting through this one a lot quicker now. So we stencil that bud in the pink, and you'll notice also that there's a lot of the design that is gone off the page too, that we're not stenciling. So I think that's actually quite a nice feature. It gives the card a lot more organic look. You could stencil this as a whole and then sort of die cut out with your squares afterwards, but I find that way you're always wondering where to cherry pick and sort of where to place the die. So I think sometimes this way it's say a much more organic way of creating that off the page look. So it comes together, this second one, an awful lot quicker. And say if you were doing this as well yourself, it's actually quite therapeutic. I really do. I mean, I've stenciled a lot of these designs a lot before, and I've done a lot of stenciling, but I still love it. I love the blending of the ink, and it's just something that sort of just clears my mind, really. I don't think of anything else other than the brush going round and round and round. Yeah, I really do love working with the inks. So I used to be a stamper, and I think I used to create a lot of backgrounds, but I think it was the blending of the inks and the adding of the colour, which is what I really enjoyed the most. So I really don't miss stamping these days, you know, because these stencils are doing it for me. I'm creating such an amazing image because the stencils have done the work. And what you need to do is sort of add that colour. It's, yeah. I still get amazed at how, you know, what you can create from these stencils. I mean, all this time on as well. So there's your image there. Now it looks very different to what I've done there. Very different to what I've done there. Say I've created like the hills in the back as well. So it's a really nice effect. Now I've taken the Ultimate 2 away. What I want to do now is to stamp my sentiment directly on there. Now I'm happy to do this because I'm confident in the ink that I'm using and in the stamping platform that I use. You can of course use any of the sentiment die cuts, stickers, add a sentiment in a way that you are completely happy with, because what you don't want to do now is go and ruin that stenciling that you've already done. Even if you did stamp and it didn't work out right, you can always then die cut something and put it then over the top. You know, there's always ways around it. But I am going to stamp straight onto here, and I'm going to position. So I've come back onto the Ultimate one because this has the stamping platform. So if you're in the UK and you was able to get this, it wasn't available in the US because of the patent. So that's where we have the Ultimate 2 for you. So I'm going to use the small or the mini sentiment stamps that Lisa has. These are available individually. I'm going to put a different sentiment to the one that I've got there because I don't like making the same card twice. So I will possibly use something like, I don't know. Now this is where I become very indecisive. I might actually go for It's Your Birthday. Now I've used textured cardstock here, and I'm stamping straight onto textured cardstock. And that is why I'm using the stamping platform, because I will need to stamp it a couple of times. It's not actually, that happy is too big. No, that birthday is too big. Now I've decided against birthday because it's too big and it was going to cover up too much of the stenciling that I've already done. So I'm going to use the birthday. Okay, so yeah, we usually try and avoid stamping onto textured cardstock, but you know, it can be done with a stamping platform. So there we are. So I'm going to take the happy there and happy birthday. Now I'm going to stamp these both at the same time, I think. So I'm going to add both stamps on there together. Layer them up like that. So I've taken the stamps from the Happy Sentiment. So this is stamp set number 80. So LHCC S080. I haven't put that on the slide. I used a different one. But I'd say you can use whichever stamp set that you have. So now I'm just going to pick up the stamps with my platform. I just need to make sure the little one is picked up also. Now I am going to use the ruler just to make sure that the cardstock stays in place because of the nature of how sticky these stamps are. and I do want that to stay in place. So I'm going to use a black VersaFine, and you can use Lisa's black ink as well. I don't have any of that, or I need to get a re-inker actually. I still haven't got around to doing it. So I'm going to ink up my stamp. Now this will take a couple of stamps to do. This is not going to be a perfect image first time round because we're stamping onto textured cardstock, but that's fine. So I'm going to pull that away, and you can see that hasn't stamped perfectly at all, which is fine. I'm not worried about that in the slightest. So I'm going to come back in and ink my stamp again and press down again, and I'm going to continue doing that until I get the image that I'm happy with. You can see this time round that the birthday has made an appearance. I think my magnets were a little bit too high, so therefore that stopped the stamp actually hitting the cardstock there. So I've just moved those magnets down a little bit, and I think that's what's helped make the birthday show up. So I've just got a bit of ink on my platform there. I do like to just keep that clean. So I'm going to come back in and just keep pressing that down. Now I'm going to favour stamping this more often over really pressing it down really hard to make sure that the ink is on. And that's because if you press any acrylic stamp, not just Lisa's actually, if you press any acrylic stamp, you will lose the clarity of the clear lines around them. So I've got to a stage that I'm really happy with the way that that's stamped. So I'm going to move that across. Now I'm just to keep my mat clean, I'm just going to put a sticky note on there. I can clean that later. Okay, so now we have our layer, and if I just hold that up to you, for you, you can see how well that's stamped even onto textured cardstock, and say I was more than happy to keep on stamping that until that has, those words got to appear and be an image that I was happy with. So this makes a really nice set of cards actually, doesn't it? Don't you think? So I can bring in my card blank now, which I've already prepared. Again, I think I might bring that down just so you can see the detail, because the detail actually on this, the background detail, is really subtle. There we are. So you can see that we have our layer there. Flat, again, if you wanted to raise that, then you absolutely could. I've cut myself another piece of white textured cardstock. That will be the mat and layer for this. Now it's exactly the same size here, so you could hide it and you could put that straight onto the card as it is. But I'm just going to offset that a little bit so we have that little white shadow. We don't obviously need it around this side, but it really does just distinguish between these two green layers here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stick these together. Now you've obviously, we'll keep the washi tape on there because now that we're adding these two together, we're not going to see that. And this is where my thumb gets in the way. It's amazing how much that hinders you. Washing your hair, putting your hair up and all sorts. It really does get in the way. But I am really clumsy when it comes to cooking, I must admit. Okay, so I'm going to layer this onto this. I'm going to just create a really small shadow, and I'm using this stitch detail as the guide to offset that. And you can see there, it's only a small offset, but it's enough, I think. Now what I will do this time round, I've actually added some foam pads. This one I did add flat onto the thing, but just to create something a little bit different, I did add foam pads onto the back of the whole white layer there. So I'm going to just take those off. And I can set that now in that larger layer on the base of the card, like so. So that's how that card comes together. Oh, hello, Angela. We've got a new name. And Amber as well. And Dorothy. Oh, look, there's a few new names come and joined us. That's lovely to see you here. Lots of new names, actually. Who's that? Whisk and Glue. That's what. Oh, Wanda Bennett. Oh, I'll catch up on that in conversations afterwards. So there we are. We have today's card for you using the floral vine. Now, if you look at it like that and you see this design here, it looks totally different, don't you think? It doesn't look as if you're using the same design at all. And then if I bring in the card that I made on Tuesday, this one here, using exactly the same collection. Again, I have embossed this one as well, but just different colours, just different setting. It looks completely different. And I think what I might do now, I'll just use this chance to show you another video that I created. I think it's over a year ago now. You'll have to go and find it. But that's the picture that you'll be looking for on YouTube here. It's actually more of a technique video, actually, where I'd actually double embossed using a completely different background embossing folder and then the floral vines on top. But it shows you another way to use this set. So that's 3 videos and 3 cards, 3 different ways on how to use this set for you now. So that's, you know, it's a really nice sort of collection, a nice collection of inspiration for you to actually get on and start using this. So hopefully you'll find all them really useful. And I'd love to know which one you'll choose to make, Bonnie. You may even choose all of them. So I'll leave that with you there today. Thanks so much for joining me this week. I've really enjoyed making these cards, really spring-inspired cards. I'll be back again with you next week. Now, don't forget that Lisa, he's back on her live with us tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening at 6:30 on a Friday. Remember, it's half an hour earlier. And in the UK now, we've actually put our clocks forward. I don't know if that makes a difference from the US or if you're watching outside of the UK. But yes, 6:30 GMT time, British time. You won't want to miss this because in the words of Lisa, she sent me a little message earlier on. She said there's a very special, brand new and exclusive launch during her live tomorrow. And it's launching on Lisa's website. So that will be thatcraftplace.co.uk. You won't want to miss it. I don't know what it is. So I'm intrigued. So I'll be tuning in too. But I'm pretty sure, knowing Lisa of old, it won't be one that you want to miss. So see you all there tomorrow. I'm sure you're excited to hear because we'll get the lowdown of the trips from New Orleans as well and the releases and the exciting sort of collaboration that she announced to us last week also. So that'll be really exciting. Thanks so much for joining me today and have a lovely weekend. I shall see you next week.